Look at your neighbor and tell them, this is not the season to explain yourself, because in 2026, noise is cheap, but silence is expensive. Everybody's talking, everybody's posting, everybody's reacting, but the people who are winning, they're quiet, they're focused, they're moving in silence and letting results do the talking. Let me say this clearly so it can sit in your spirit. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not fear. Silence is not surrender. Silence is strategy. In 2026, the loudest person in the room is no longer the leader. The most emotional voice is no longer the authority. And the one who explains everything is usually the one who owns nothing. See, there was a time when you had to announce your moves. There was a time when validation came from applause. But that season is over because power has matured, and mature power doesn't argue. Mature power doesn't post everything. Mature power doesn't chase attention. Mature power moves in silence and shocks the world with execution. If you're ready to step into a higher level of control, discipline, and dominance, then this message is not just for your ears. It's for your evolution. Let me slow this down and let it sink into your spirit. Silence protects your vision because not everyone deserves access to what God whispered to you in private. Some of you have been leaking destiny because you've been talking too much to people who don't have the capacity to understand where you're going. You announced it too early. You shared it too fast. You gave sacred information to casual listeners. And now you're wondering why the fire feels weaker, why the confidence feels shaky, why the momentum stalled. It's not because the vision was wrong. It's because the vision was exposed. Everything powerful begins in silence. A seed doesn't grow on the surface. It grows underground, in darkness, in pressure, in isolation. And if you dig it up every week to show people how it's doing, you kill its chance to become what it was designed to be. Some of you have been digging up your own future just to get applause in the present. Silence is a form of protection. When you are quiet, you guard your energy. When you are quiet, you guard your focus. When you are quiet, you guard your belief. Because the truth is, everybody who claps for you is not rooting for you. Everybody who listens to you is not aligned with you. And everybody who asks questions doesn't want to help. Some people are just gathering information to form an opinion that was never going to favor you anyway. There are people who will smile at your dream while secretly measuring it against their own limitations. And when they can't see themselves doing what you're called to do, they'll start planting doubt, subtle doubt, reasonable doubt. I'm just being honest doubt. And if you're not careful, you'll start editing your vision to make other people comfortable. You'll start shrinking what God made expansive. You'll start negotiating with greatness because you talk to the wrong audience. Silence protects you from unnecessary warfare. Not every attack is meant to be fought. Some battles only exist because you announced yourself too early. You told people your next move, and now you're fighting resistance that never needed to be activated. You woke up opposition that was still asleep. You triggered jealousy that didn't even know your name until you introduced yourself. There are enemies who would have never noticed you if you had just stayed quiet and kept building. Hear me clearly. Privacy is not fear. Privacy is wisdom. Every level of elevation requires a new level of restraint. When you were smaller, you could talk freely. When the stakes were lower, you could explain everything. But now the calling is heavier. The assignment is bigger. The responsibility is greater. And with greatness comes the requirement of discretion. You don't owe everyone an update. You don't owe everyone an explanation. You don't owe everyone access. Some doors close not because people hate you, but because you gave them information they were never meant to hold. Vision is weighty. Not everybody has the strength to carry it. And when weak hands touch heavy vision, it falls. Silence also protects you from self-sabotage, because sometimes the most dangerous voice is not the critics. It's your own when you talk too soon. When you speak before the plan is solid, when you announce before the discipline is formed, when you declare before the habits are built. Talking can give you a false sense of accomplishment. It can trick your mind into thinking progress has been made just because words were released. But talking doesn't build muscle. Talking doesn't build character. Talking doesn't build consistency. Work does. And silence keeps you working. When nobody knows what you're doing, you're not performing, you're producing. When nobody's watching, you're not acting, you're becoming. When there's no applause, no comments, no validation, you find out whether the vision is real or just something you like talking about. Silence separates the serious from the emotional. People who are serious about their calling don't need constant affirmation. They don't need to be seen every step of the way. They understand that the reward is not in the announcement, it's in the arrival. They are willing to be misunderstood for a season so they can be undeniable later. And let me say this part strong. Some people lost access to your vision, not because they did anything wrong, but because you outgrew their clearance level. There are conversations you can no longer have, details you can no longer share, dreams you can no longer unpack in public. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're responsible. Silence matures you. It teaches you patience. It teaches you discernment. It teaches you timing. It teaches you how to move without needing approval. And when you master silence, you stop leaking power. You stop wasting energy. You stop trying to convince people who were never assigned to understand you. In this season, let silence be your shield. Build quietly. Plan quietly, prepare quietly, heal quietly, grow quietly. And when the time comes, when the vision is fully formed, when the foundation is strong, when the results are undeniable, you won't have to say a word because success will speak for you. Let me speak this plainly because this truth will set some of you free. Explanation is a form of permission. Every time you over-explain yourself, you are unconsciously asking for approval from people who were never assigned authority over your life. You are saying, please understand me so I can move forward. And the moment you do that, you surrender power. Because the one who needs permission is never the one in control. Power does not explain itself. Power demonstrates. Some of you are exhausted, not because the work is heavy, but because the explaining is constant. You explain your decisions. You explain your boundaries. You explain your growth. You explain why you change. You explain why you can't stay the same. And every explanation is a negotiation you didn't need to enter. Let me tell you something hard but true. People who benefit from the old version of you will always demand an explanation when you evolve. They don't want clarity. They want control. They want a reason to argue. They want an opening to pull you back into a version of yourself that made them comfortable. When you explain too much, you give people the illusion that their opinion matters more than your assignment. And once they believe they have a vote, they will start trying to rewrite your decisions. They will debate your timing. They will question your motives. They will analyze your tone. And before you know it, you are defending a life that no longer belongs to them. You don't need permission to grow. You don't need permission to change direction. You don't need permission to protect your peace. The need to explain often comes from fear. The fear of being misunderstood. The fear of disappointing people. The fear of being seen as selfish or cold or arrogant. But hear me carefully. Being misunderstood is not a curse. It is often a sign that you are moving ahead of the crowd. Jesus was misunderstood. Visionaries are misunderstood. Leaders are misunderstood. And if you wait to be understood before you move, you will stay stuck explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you anyway. Explanations invite arguments. The moment you explain your why, someone will offer a counter why. The moment you explain your boundaries, someone will test them. The moment you explain your standards, someone will try to negotiate them. Because explanation opens the door to debate, and debate dry. NS authority. Silence, on the other hand, closes the courtroom. When you stop explaining, you stop defending. When you stop defending, you stop fighting. And when you stop fighting, you regain focus. There are people in your life who don't need explanations. They need adjustments. They need to get used to the new you. They need to learn your new limits. They need to understand that access has changed, not because you're bitter, but because you're re-becoming disciplined. Let me say this with love. Explanations don't heal insecurity. They feed it. The more you explain, the more people feel entitled to ask for more. One explanation turns into 10 questions. One clarification turns into an interrogation. And suddenly, your peace is being cross-examined by people who don't even understand the assignment on your life. You were not called to convince. You were called to commit. You were not called to debate your destiny. You were called to walk it out. Some of you keep revisiting decisions God already confirmed simply because someone questioned you. And instead of standing firm, you felt the need to explain. But conviction does not require commentary. When you are sure, you are silent. When you are grounded, you don't argue. When you are aligned, you don't need approval. Explanation weakens leadership. Think about it. Have you ever seen true authority rush to justify itself? Kings don't explain themselves to the crowd. CEOs don't poll employees about every decision. Parents don't negotiate every rule with children. Authority sets direction and lets results validate the decision. When you over-explain, you lower yourself to the level of people who are not responsible for the outcome. And that's dangerous because the people who question the loudest are rarely the ones who will carry the consequences. Silence communicates confidence. It says, I know what I'm doing. It says, I've made my decision. It says, this is not up for discussion. And that kind of silence is not rude. It's respectful to your calling. Some relationships will shift when you stop explaining. Some people will feel uncomfortable. Some will accuse you of changing. Let them. Growth always offends familiarity. But the moment you stop handing out explanations, you will feel something return to you. Clarity, strength, authority. You will realize how much energy you were wasting trying to be understood by people who were never meant to walk with you into the next season. In 2026, you must understand this. The more you explain, the more you expose yourself to influence that doesn't belong in your life. But when you move with quiet certainty, people either adjust or they fall away. And either way, you move forward. So stop explaining, start executing. Let your consistency answer the questions your mouth no longer needs to entertain. Because when you reclaim your silence, you reclaim your power. Let me take you deeper now, because this is where real authority is formed. Silence builds emotional authority. Not the kind of authority that comes from position or title, but the kind that settles a room when you walk in. The kind that doesn't need volume to be felt. The kind that doesn't argue, doesn't react, doesn't explain itself. Emotional authority is when your presence speaks before your mouth ever opens. Most people think power is loud. They think power proves itself. They think power wins by overpowering. But real power is calm. Real power is controlled. Real power is steady under pressure. And silence is the training ground for that kind of power. When you respond to everything, you give everything access to you. Every comment, every look, every opinion, every provocation gets to touch your emotions. And once people learn what triggers you, they learn how to control you. The fastest way to lose authority is to be easily provoked. Silence interrupts that cycle. When you don't react, you remain unmovable. When you don't speak immediately, you stay centered. When you pause, you take back control of the moment. And control of your emotions is control of the situation. Emotional authority is not about suppressing feelings. It's about mastering them. There are moments when people expect you to snap. They expect you to defend yourself. They expect you to explain. They expect you to prove them wrong. And when you don't, something shifts. The energy changes. The room recalibrates. Because they realize they can't move you. Silence confuses is insecurity. Insecure people need reactions to feel relevant. They need engagement to feel powerful. They throw words, accusations, opinions, and jabs, not to communicate, but to get a response. And when you don't give them one, you starve the behavior. Your silence becomes a mirror. It forces people to sit with their own noise. It exposes their emotional instability without you saying a word. And the moment someone realizes they can't pull you into chaos, they either rise to your level or they remove themselves from your space. Silence also protects your clarity. Emotions are loud. They rush, they exaggerate, they demand immediate action. But wisdom is quiet. Wisdom takes its time. Wisdom listens before it speaks. And when you live in constant reaction, you can't hear wisdom clearly. Silence creates space between stimulus and response. And in that space, maturity lies. That pause before you reply to the message, before you answer the accusation, before you correct the misunderstanding is where emotional authority is built. Because instead of responding from ego, you respond from alignment. Instead of reacting from hurt, you move from truth. And people feel the difference. Have you noticed that the calmest person in the room always seems to be the one others look to when things go wrong? When there's tension, when there's conflict, when emotions rise, everyone watches the person who stays composed, because composure signals leadership. You don't have to say, I'm in charge. RG. Your emotional control announces it for you. Silence also keeps you from saying what feels good in the moment but costs you later. Some words give temporary relief and permanent damage. Some reactions feel justified but weaken your position. Silence saves you from self-inflicted wounds. You don't lose authority when you don't respond. You lose authority when you respond emotionally. People don't remember who talked the most. They remember who stayed solid. They remember who didn't panic. They remember who didn't flinch. They remember who didn't need to prove anything. And over time, that consistency builds trust, because people trust those who are stable. They trust those who don't swing with every mood. They trust those who don't let their emotions leak into every decision. Silence trains you to lead yourself before you try to lead others. If you can't govern your tongue, you can't govern influence. If you can't manage your emotions, you can't manage people. Authority starts inward before it ever shows outward. Some of you keep giving away your power by explaining yourself in emotional moments. You speak while angry. You text while hurt. You respond while triggered, and then you spend days trying to clean up what 5 seconds of silence would have prevented. Silence is not avoidance. It's discipline. It's saying, I will not let my emotions speak louder than my values. It's choosing long-term respect over short-term relief. It's trusting that time will reveal what you don't need to defend today. Silence also teaches others how to treat you. When you don't engage in drama, drama stops knocking. When you don't respond to disrespect, people adjust their tone. When you don't entertain chaos, chaos looks for another address. Your boundaries don't need announcements. Your silence enforces them. And here's the final truth. Emotional authority grows quietly. Nobody applauds it in the beginning. Nobody notices it right away. But over time, something happens. People listen when you speak. They pause when you enter. They weigh your words differently because they know you don't talk just to talk. You speak when it matters. And when you master silence, you don't just control your emotions. You command the atmosphere. Let me uncover this layer carefully, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Noise is a distraction tool. It is not random. It is not accidental. It is intentional, strategic, and designed to keep you reactive instead of productive. Noise exists to pull your attention away from what actually matters and scatter your focus across things that don't move your life forward. Noise is constant commentary. Noise is endless opinions. Noise is notifications, arguments, trends, and outrage cycles that reset every 24 hours. And the goal of all that noise is simple: keep you busy reacting so you never start building. Distraction doesn't always look like temptation. Sometimes it looks like information. Sometimes it okays like entertainment. Sometimes it looks like being informed. But if it doesn't align you with your assignment, it is a tool being used against your focus. Noise feeds on emotion. It pulls you into debates you didn't need to join. It drags you into conflicts that don't pay you. It convinces you that you must have an opinion on everything, respond to everything, defend everything. And every time you engage, you lose time, energy, and clarity. The enemy of your future is not always opposition. Sometimes it's overstimulation. You were never designed to carry this much input. Your mind was never meant to process this many voices. And when too many voices speak at once, discernment gets buried under volume. Noise makes everything feel urgent. It convinces you that everything is a crisis, everything is breaking, everything demands immediate attention. And when everything feels urgent, nothing gets done well. You jump from issue to issue, reaction to reaction, never staying focused long enough to make real progress. Busy is not the same as effective. You can be exhausted and still unproductive. You can be emotionally invested and still going nowhere. Noise creates the illusion of movement while keeping you exactly where you are. Silence breaks that illusion. When you step away from noise, you begin to hear yourself again. You begin to hear direction. You begin to hear conviction, because purpose speaks softly and it cannot compete with chaos. Noise also steals your creativity. The mind needs space to create. It needs stillness to innovate. It needs quiet to think deeply. But when you're constantly consuming, scrolling, watching, reacting, you leave no room to produce. Consumption without intention leads to confusion, and confusion leads to procrastination. Many people are not lazy. They are overwhelmed. Their minds are cluttered. Their attention is fractured. They know what they want to do, but they can't stay still long enough to do it. Noise thrives in that chaos. It keeps you entertained instead of empowered. It keeps you emotionally engaged instead of strategically aligned. And the longer you stay distracted, the more comfortable you become with delay. Noise also trains you to seek validation instead of results. When everything is public, performance replaces progress. You start doing things for reaction instead of impact. You measure success by attention instead of advancement. And slowly your goals shift from building something meaningful to being noticed for something visible. But attention is cheap. Focus is rare. And in 2026, the rarest skill you can have is the ability to concentrate deeply while the world is screaming for your attention. Noise weakens discipline. It interrupts routines. It breaks momentum. It pulls you out of flow. And flow is where excellence is formed. Flow requires uninterrupted time, mental presence, and emotional steadiness. Things noise is designed to destroy. You can't build mastery in a distracted state. You can't grow consistency in chaos. You can't hear strategy while reacting to sound bites. Silence, on the other hand, is not empty. It's intentional, it's curated, it's selective, it's the deliberate removal of distractions so what matters can rise to the surface. When you choose silence, you're not escaping reality. You're engaging it at a deeper level. You're saying, I will not let every voice shape my direction. There you're saying, I will not outsource my attention. B, you're saying, I will decide what deserves access to my mind. B, R, and that decision changes everything, because once you reduce noise, you increase momentum. You begin to finish things. You follow through. You think long term instead of reacting short term. You stop chasing trends and start building foundations. Noise wants your reaction. Silence produces your results. And here's the truth. Many people don't want to admit some noise feels productive because it makes you feel involved, it makes you feel relevant, it makes you feel informed, but involvement without intention is still distraction. You don't need to know everything. .br. You don't need to respond to everything. .br. You don't need to be everywhere. You need to be focused. .br. And focus is protected by silence. The people who will dominate the next season are not the loudest voices online. They are the quiet builders offline. They are the ones who stepped away from constant noise and invested that time into skill, discipline, health, CLA, ready, and execution. While others were arguing, they were learning. While others were reacting, they were refining. While others were consuming, they were creating. So let the world be loud. You don't need to join it. Because the moment you master silence, noise loses its power over you, and you finally gain the freedom to build what you were called to build. Let me tell you why your next level demands privacy. Because greatness cannot be incubated in public. Every major transformation requires a hidden season, a season where you are not performing, not explaining, not posting, not proving, just becoming. And the reason many people never reach their next level is not lack of talent, not lack of opportunity, not lack of prayer, but lack of privacy. Exposure too early damages development. When everything you do is visible, you start adjusting your growth to fit the audience. You begin making decisions based on perception instead of purpose. You rush processes that were meant to take time because you feel watched. And instead of becoming solid, you become impressive. And impressive doesn't last. Privacy allows you to grow without pressure. When no one is watching, you can fail safely. You can be honest about your weaknesses. You can confront the parts of yourself that need discipline instead of applause. Growth is messy before it is majestic, and privacy gives you the freedom to be unfinished. Some of you are trying to transform in front of spectators. You're healing publicly. You're learning publicly. You're changing publicly. And every time you stumble, you feel exposed, judged, or discouraged. Not because growth is wrong, but because growth was never meant to be consumed as entertainment. The strongest versions of people are built when no one is clapping. Privacy protects your momentum. When too many people know what you're working on, their opinions begin to influence your pace. One person says you're moving too fast. Another says you're moving too slow. One encourages you. Another doubts you. And now your focus is split. Not because the vision is unclear, but because too many voices are involved. Momentum requires singular focus, and focus requires distance. Privacy also protects your confidence. Confidence is fragile in its early stages. Before habits are formed, before results are visible, before mastery is built, confidence needs space to strengthen. But when you expose yourself too soon, criticism can damage what discipline was still forming. Not all feedback is helpful. Some opinions are premature, some critiques are uninformed, some judgments are rooted in insecurity, and when you're still becoming, those voices can interrupt the process.
Privacy filters the noise.
It allows you to listen only to what aligns with your growth. It helps you distinguish between constructive guidance and unnecessary commentary. And it keeps your emotional energy directed toward progress instead of defense. Your next level also requires privacy, because not everyone can handle your evolution. Some people are comfortable with the old you. They've learned how to relate to that version. They've built expectations around that version. And when you begin to change, their discomfort can turn into resistance. Privacy gives them time to adjust or to exit. Both are necessary. You don't need to explain every change. You don't need to justify every boundary. You don't need to announce every upgrade. Growth speaks best when it's complete. Privacy allows transformation to finish its work before being introduced to the world. It allows the roots to go deep so the fruit can last, and deep roots are formed in hidden places. Spent 30 years in obscurity before 3 years of impact. Preparation took longer than presentation, and that pattern has not changed. Your private season is not punishment. It's preparation. It's where discipline is built. It's where character is refined. It's where identity is solidified. And when identity is strong, opinions lose their power. Privacy also trains you to be self-motivated. When no one is watching, posting, or praising, you find out whether the vision is real. You discover whether you're driven by purpose or attention. And that discovery is essential because attention fades, but purpose sustains. Some of you are afraid of privacy because it feels like invisibility. But invisibility is not insignificance. It's incubation. It's God removing distractions so you can hear, see clearly, think deeply, and move intentionally. It's the quiet where habits replace hype and consistency replaces excitement. Public success without private discipline collapses under pressure. That's why some people rise fast and fall hard. They were seen before they were stable. They were celebrated before they were prepared. And exposure became a burden instead of a blessing. Privacy keeps you grounded. It gives you time to build emotional resilience, to develop spiritual depth, to strengthen mental focus. And when you finally step into visibility, you're not dependent on it. You can handle applause without addiction. You can handle criticism without collapse because you were built in private. Your next level is not about being seen. It's about being ready. And readiness is formed when nobody is watching. So don't rush exposure. Don't announce unfinished work. Don't invite spectators into sacred processes. Protect your private season because when it's time to be revealed, you won't need to introduce yourself. Your growth will speak for you. Let me take you into this truth because this is where wisdom becomes survival. Silence sharpens discernment. Discernment is not just the ability to hear, it's the ability to separate, to recognize what matters and what doesn't, to sense what's aligned and what's disguised. And in a world that never stops talking, discernment is dulled by constant noise. You cannot discern clearly when you are overstimulated. Every ice wants your attention. Every opinion wants influence. Every trend wants your agreement. And when you allow everything to speak into you, you lose the ability to distinguish truth from familiarity. Familiarity feels right, but that doesn't mean it is right. Silence gives your mind room to process. It slows things down so you can see patterns instead of just moments. It allows you to observe instead of react. And observation is the foundation of discernment. When you speak too quickly, you reveal what you feel. When you stay silent, you learn what others reveal. People show you who they are when you don't interrupt them. When you don't rush to fill the space with words, you notice tone, you notice hesitation, you notice inconsistency. Silence allows information to surface naturally. It lets truth come out without pressure. Discernment is often lost because people talk themselves out of it. They explain away red flags. They rationalize discomfort. They override intuition with logic because they're talking too much and listening too little. Silence reconnects you with that inner awareness that alerts you before damage happens. Your intuition doesn't shout, it whispers, and whispers are drowned out by constant conversation. Silence also helps you detect motives. When you talk less, people talk more. They reveal their priorities, their intentions, their insecurities. You begin to hear what's behind the words. You start noticing who listens and who only waits for their turn to speak. Discernment grows when you stop volunteering information and start collecting insight. Some people don't need access. They need observation. And silence gives you the vantage point to observe without being entangled. Discernment protects you from emotional decisions. Emotions rush. Discernment waits. Emotions react. Discernment evaluates. When you're silent, you create distance between feeling and action. That distance is where wisdom lives. It's where you ask, what is really happening here? Instead of, how do I feel about this right now? Many people regret decisions not because they were wrong, but because they were rushed. Silence slows your pace enough to choose intentionally. Discernment also requires humility. You have to accept that you don't know everything, that your first reaction may not be your best response. Silence keeps you teachable. It keeps you open. It prevents pride from speaking too soon. Sometimes silence is not about restraint. It's about respect for the process, respect for timing, respect for understanding, respect for clarity. Silence also filters spiritual and mental noise. Not every thought is yours. Not every urge is truth. Not every idea is aligned. And when your mind is constantly engaged, you can't tell the difference. Silence exposes which thoughts linger when distractions are removed. The thoughts that remain in silence are the ones worth examining. Discernment grows when you learn to sit with yourself without external input. When you stop scrolling, when you stop consuming, when you stop reacting. And in that stillness, patterns emerge. Convictions become clearer. Direction becomes sharper. Silence reveals alignment. It helps you sense when something feels off, even if it looks right. It helps you recognize when something feels right, even if it looks risky. Discernment is not always logical, but it is rarely wrong. Silence also protects you from manipulation. Manipulation thrives in urgency. It pressures, it rushes, it demands immediate answers. Silence breaks that control. When you pause, you remove yourself from emotional leverage. You regain your footing. A person who cannot be rushed cannot be easily manipulated. Silence also strengthens your decision-making muscles. The more you practice waiting, the better you become at choosing. You stop confusing options with opportunities. You stop mistaking access for assignment. You stop saying yes just because something is available. Discernment teaches you when to walk away, even from good things. Not everything good is for you. Not everything available is aligned. And silence helps you feel the difference. There are voices you don't need to hear, paths you don't need to explore, opportunities you don't need to chase. Silence helps you conserve energy for what truly matters. And here's the deeper truth. Discernment is cumulative. Every time you choose silence over reaction, your clarity increases. Every time you wait, instead of rushing, your wisdom deepens. Every time you listen more than you speak, your perception sharpens. Over time, you stop needing signs. You stop needing confirmation. You know, and that knowing doesn't come from noise, it comes from silence. So in this season, protect your quiet, because in that quiet, your discernment becomes precise, and precision is power. Let me bring this home, because this is where maturity separates from hype. Results speak louder than announcements. There was a time when telling people your plans felt productive, when saying it out loud made it feel real, when posting the vision gave you a sense of movement. But the truth is, announcements can become a substitute for execution. They create the feeling of progress without the substance of progress. Talking feels like movement. Results are movement. In this season, you don't need to tell people what you're about to do. You need to show them what you've done. Because words invite opinions, but results end conversations. Announcements attract attention. Results command respect. Attention is emotional. It's fleeting. It's driven by excitement and curiosity. But respect is earned through consistency, discipline, and proof. And respect lasts longer than applause. Some of you have been explaining your potential for years. You've told people what you're capable of. You've described your vision in detail. You've rehearsed the future so often that it feels like it already happened. But potential that isn't executed becomes frustration. Results remove doubt. They remove debate. They remove the need to convince. Nobody argues with evidence. When results show up, explanations become unnecessary. Your work introduces you. Your discipline speaks for you. Your consistency becomes your credibility. Announcements can also make you vulnerable. When you tell people what you planned to do before you built the foundation, you invite judgment before completion. People begin to measure you against timelines you never agreed to. They start watching your progress, and pressure replaces focus. Results eliminate that pressure. You work in peace. You build without commentary. You move without scrutiny. And when you finally reveal the outcome, it stands on its own. There's also a psychological trap in announcing too early. When you talk about a goal publicly, your brain can mistake the recognition for achievement. You get the dopamine hit of validation without the labor of completion. And over time, that habit weakens discipline. Silence keeps hunger alive. Results feed discipline. When nobody knows what you're building, you stay committed to the work instead of the applause. You don't need to impress, you need to improve. And improvement compounds. Results come from repetition, not revelation. They come from showing up when it's boring, from doing the work when it's unseen, from choosing consistency over excitement. Announcements chase excitement. Results reward endurance. Let me say this clearly. People don't follow talkers for long. They may listen. They may like, they may comment, but they don't trust. Trust is built when words align with outcomes, when promises match performance, when consistency proves character. Results also protect you from unnecessary comparison. When you announce your plans, people begin comparing timelines, resources, and outcomes. You start looking sideways instead of forward. But when you focus on results, comparison loses relevance. Your progress becomes personal, not competitive. Results are deeply personal. They reflect discipline, sacrifice, and patience, things you can't fake. And when you finally step into visibility, you were not seeking validation. You're offering evidence. Results also speak in silence. They don't argue. They don't boast. They don't explain themselves. They simply exist, and their existence changes how people perceive you. People treat you differently when you produce. They listen differently. They question less. They respect more because results shift authority. You no longer need permission. You no longer need approval. You no longer need to be understood. You are undeniable. Some of you are waiting for the right moment to announce, the right audience, the right platform. But the right moment is after the work is done, after the habit is formed, after the discipline is proven, after the result exists. Silence gives results time to mature. It gives you space to correct mistakes privately, to refine processes, to strengthen weak areas, so that when the result appears, it's stable, sustainable, repeatable. Results also create momentum. One, once you see proof of progress, belief deepens. Confidence becomes grounded. Motivation becomes internal. You're no longer fueled by what you hope will happen. You're fueled by what already has. Results change your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who plans. You become someone who finishes, and finishers move differently. They don't rush to speak. They don't need to announce. They let outcomes do the talking. In this season, trade announcements for action, trade explanation for execution, trade visibility for consistency. And when people ask, when did this happen? Your answer won't be a speech. It will be the result standing right in front of them. Because results don't need a microphone. They already have a voice. Let me tell you something that will save you years of energy, peace, and progress. Not every battle deserves a response. Some fights are not tests of strength. They are traps of distraction. They are designed to pull you off your path, drain your focus, and entangle you in drama that produces no reward. And the fastest way to lose momentum is to respond to everything that challenges you. Just because something comes for you doesn't mean it's meant for you. Maturity is knowing the difference between a battle that builds you and a battle that breaks your focus. Wisdom is realizing that winning is not always about confrontation. Sometimes winning is about walking away untouched. There are people who provoke not because they want resolution, but because they want reaction. They want engagement. They want access to your emotional energy. And the moment you respond, they win. Not because they were right, but because they succeeded in pulling you into their chaos. Your attention is valuable, and not everyone deserves it. Responding to everything puts you in a defensive posture. You start reacting instead of leading. You start explaining instead of building. You start proving instead of progressing. And over time, you forget what you were even working toward because you've been busy addressing noise. Silence is a strategic withdrawal. It's not weakness. It's not fear. It's intelligence. When you don't respond, you deny the situation power over you. You refuse to validate it with energy, and energy is what fuels conflict. Without energy, most battles die on their own. Some arguments don't need to be solved. They need to be starved. Silence starves chaos. There are moments when responding feels justified, when staying quiet feels unfair, when silence feels like losing. But hear this, peace is not loss. Focus is not surrender. Choosing not to engage is often the highest form of self-respect. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding. You don't have to defend yourself against every accusation, especially when the people accusing you are not invested in your growth or your outcome. Some people don't want truth, they want control. They use conflict to feel powerful. They use confrontation to feel relevant, and silence removes their leverage. When you stop responding, you shift the dynamic. You regain your footing. You take back the emotional high ground. And often the very people trying to provoke you will expose themselves through their persistence. Silence lets people reveal themselves. The more you stay calm, the louder their insecurity becomes. The more you remain focused, the more obvious their distraction is. And you didn't have to say a word. There's also a cost to fighting every battle. It costs emotional energy. It costs mental clarity. It costs time you will never get back. And time is your most non-renewable resource. You cannot afford to waste it on arguments that don't advance your life. Some of you are tired because you've been fighting battles that were never yours to fight. Battles of ego, battles of pride, battles of perception, battles of proving you're right. But being right doesn't always make you effective. Winning an argument doesn't always move you forward. And sometimes the biggest victory is refusing to step into the ring at all. Silence also protects your character. When emotions run high, words can do permanent damage. A moment of reaction can undo years of credibility. Silence gives you time to cool down, to choose wisely, to respond only when it adds value, not just relief. There are times when a response is necessary, but discernment tells you when, not urgency, not ego, not pressure. Silence gives you the space to decide whether engagement is productive or pointless. And here's the truth. Many people don't want to accept. Some people only respect you when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop arguing, when you stop justifying. They may not like it, but they will feel it because calm confidence is intimidating to chaos. Not every door needs to be slammed. Some just need to be closed quietly. Silence also preserves your reputation. When you engage in public battles, perception becomes messy. Stories get twisted, motives get questioned. But when you stay silent and consistent, truth has room to surface. Time reveals what arguments cannot. Consistency exposes what confrontation never will. And when the dust settles, the person who kept building will always stand taller than the person who kept fighting. You don't need to win every round. You need to win the long game. And the long game is about focus, discipline, and direction, not emotional skirmishes that fade by tomorrow. So let some things go unanswered. Let some comments sit. Let some accusations pass. Your silence is not submission. It's selection. You are choosing what deserves your energy. And when you choose wisely, you move forward lighter, clearer, and stronger, because sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to walk away and keep building.